How can an app help support well-being? What I'd like to do is just start off with a brief introduction, what the research question is, and some of the insights that I've gained over the last 30 years in following this passion. What the research goal was is essentially, can we design a process and later on an app that can guide you through the process to help you discover and challenge limiting assumptions or beliefs without having to spend 5 years with a psychologist or even psychiatrist. And then I'll share with you a little bit of the work that we've done in field testing. We've done extensive field testing. The first version of this was around 2005. I had a massive insight in 2010 at an Odyssey alumni program with Ellie, actually in South Africa, down in Fancourt. And I'll share with you some of the applications and future plans that we have in the method that I've developed in the app that is now being used to follow this method. So I'm CEO of Goldratt Research Labs. I founded in 2007 on request of Dr. Ellie Goldratt to develop new knowledge in theory of constraints and new applications. Our primary focus is on decision making, is helping individuals and organizations discover and overcome limiting beliefs that will help them make better, faster decisions when it really matters. We make many, many decisions every day. Most of them don't matter: what we eat, what we drink, where we're going, but a few does matter. Getting those right or wrong can be the difference between success and failure in life. I have the privilege today to have research partnerships with some of the leading organizations in the world, and that has given me an amazing test laboratory to test the theories that we develop and test the applications that we develop. Getting back to the topic for today, the question is, can an app help you to improve well-being? So the first thing is, what is well-being? And there was incredible research done by Dr. Martin Seligman. He's the founder of positive psychology. He wrote a book called Flourish. If you haven't read it, I can highly recommend it. What he discovered was that happiness or well-being is a construct. You can't measure it directly. But what you can do is you can measure the elements that constitute well-being. And he came up with this acronym called PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. He said that our well-being is improved when we experience more positive emotion, the P, when we have more engagement, the E. This is essentially how often we get into flow, right? When you lose senses of all time and you get 2 hours work done, just like this, right? Before you know it, suddenly it's done. Something that might have taken you 2 weeks before, you suddenly get done in just a few hours of being fully in flow. Your relationships, improving your relationships, improve your well-being. Doing work that is meaningful, and finally, doing something that gives you a sense of achievement, even if it's not meaningful at all. So he realized that these were the core elements of well-being. And if we can figure out how to improve these individual elements, or which of those are below the level of good enough, that's the way to improve our well-being. His insight was this well-being is directly impacted by our choices to improve PERMA. So if we spend too much time on a golf course to experience a sense of achievement, guess what's going to happen to the other elements? It will go down. So how do we make these choices? I studied Dr. Daniel Kahneman, and what he explained, very simple, is that we really have 2 systems for making decisions. System 1, System 2. System 1, fully automatic, fast and fully automatic. Even though we don't like to think about it, is most of our decisions are made in fast and automatic mode. System 2 is our more slow and deliberate mode of thinking. And what he said was that most of our decisions are made in System 1 because it's trying to have shortcuts. It consumes a scarce resource when we make decisions. So if we can come up with a heuristic that allows us to not think about it and just make the decision, it saves us a lot of energy and capacity of the scarce resource. But it's prone to errors. So when people say, you should trust your judgment, go with your gut, it's right unless we don't realize to what extent our intuition and gut is often influenced by very strong emotions. We have exaggerated fears of loss and effort or risk that can cause us to get stuck, to procrastinate making good changes in our life. And we have exaggerated frustrations and expectations that can cause us to overreact and make really bad changes or choices in our life, like losing our temper when we know it's not going to be that useful, right? Probably very harmful. So this was the background, and suddenly you start thinking about, okay, so what's the bottleneck here, right? What's the thing that's limiting us from improving our well-being and from making better, faster decisions? And this was something that we started asking ourselves already in the early 2000s, and I shared a few quotes with Ellie Goldratt that struck me that this question has actually been answered a long time ago. But where do you think the bottleneck is? Is it we don't have enough money, we don't have enough wisdom or information, enough time or courage? What we realized very quickly is that when we say we don't have enough time, we actually mean we don't have enough attention. The number of things that demand our attention will always exceed our available attention. As a result, our attention is the bottleneck, and it will always be the bottleneck. The second thing that I'll come to later is we realize that when we say we lack courage, we often confuse lack of courage with the inability to deal with ambivalence. Ambivalence is when we see both the positive and negative of paying attention to something or someone, and we get stuck because we don't know how to resolve the ambivalence. So those were two key insights. So when we think about that shortage, if you think about that was our constraint, so how do we make sure we don't waste it, right? What are the errors that we make? So if it was a machine, starvation, blockage, planned downtime. So we started looking at what are the errors that we make. And those are the 4 decision mistakes we make that cause us to waste a scarce resource. We do the wrong things, we don't do the right things, and then have to come up with explanations and recovery plans, and we never get to start doing the right thing. We do the right things in the wrong way, we multitask. And finally, my favorite, we repeat mistakes, number 1, 2, and 3. We don't learn from experience. So 4 very generic ways that we all waste our limited attention, our scarcest attention, which then makes sense that when you start any new initiative, what should be step number 1? Is an action that will prevent mistake number 1, which is what should we stop doing? And because if we don't tell people what to stop doing, where will they find the attention, the capacity to start doing the things that can make a difference? But why do we make these bad decisions? And in my research, what I found is that there's actually a classification that we could use for this. The first thing to realize is that some of these decision mistakes are simply unavoidable. We will never know. If somebody asks you to forecast how much is going to be sold of a specific product in a specific location, there's no way to get that right. The mistake in your decision, whatever it is unavoidable. But what is not unavoidable is how can I protect myself against that? And what you'll see as I go through the steps is what my passion has become is can we come up with very simple enabling mechanisms, enabling assumptions or beliefs that help us to see and unlock potential. And at the same time, can we come up with very simple protection mechanisms that can protect us against unavoidable mistakes and delays that we experience either in the flow or in our decision making. The good news is there's a bunch of these mistakes that we make that are avoidable. So why do we make them? Firstly, ignorance. We didn't know, but somebody else did. Inertia, we knew, but we didn't act. And lastly, ineptitude. We knew, we acted, but we compromised. It turns out that as knowledge is growing, ignorance is becoming less and less of the cause. Think about it. Are people really ignorant of the problems they have? Are they really ignorant of the consequences of those problems? So people are not ignorant of the problem. They're not ignorant of the consequence of the problem. They're often not ignorant of the solution. And yet they get stuck. Of course, we have to check, are they really ignorant? And you'll see in the process how we've designed a process that will make sure that each of these possible avoidable mistakes is being addressed. The biggest by far cause is inertia and ineptitude. Inertia is we underreact. right? We procrastinate. We don't make the good changes and choices. Ineptitude is we often overreact. So what are the causes and consequences of our attention bottleneck? How do we know we have a bottleneck in the system? There's a backlog, right? Why do resources become bottlenecks? They don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a bottleneck. Somebody made a bad decision, right? They either overloaded, overcommitted that resource, or they got it to do stuff that's not useful. That's wasting. It's wasting its capacity. And why would you make these bad decisions? Because of some bad assumption. And that closed the loop to me to go back to, wow, those are the things that we need to find out, right? Those limiting assumptions and beliefs that cause us to make and often repeat bad decisions that turn resources into bottlenecks and that causes backlogs, frustrations, and drops in goal units that we can achieve in our lifetime or for the organization. So what I set out to do as a goal was, okay, these bad decisions can be because of ignorance. We need a process to make sure we don't make that mistake. But mostly it's because of inertia and inaptitude. Can we come up with a process that can help us to check and challenge that? And that was my mission. I studied everybody that was into decision making. Benjamin Franklin was the first one to formalize a decision-making process, right? Pro and con list. Big benefits because it can quickly expose a bias. You write down all the pros, you have 20. You write down the cons, you have 1. Okay? It should tell you probably have a bias. And that's unfortunately what happens in decision-making. The inherent simplicity within decision-making is that we make a decision and then we rationalize. We don't rationalize and then make a decision. We make a decision in our fully automatic most of the time, and then all that happens is the mind starts looking for evidence until it crosses a threshold, and then we make a decision. So how can we find these thresholds? If we just get asked the right question. Making a change in your life or organization is like climbing a mountain. There's 2 reasons to do it, right? That decision hangs over you. Why? Because there's a big pot of gold on the top of the mountain. That's one reason we want to move towards. And there's also a big crocodile in the lake. That even if there wasn't a pot of gold, I want to move away from this thing. So whatever I write down as my pot of gold and my alligators is a way of exposing my assumptions about this change. I want to check, is this change a good idea or not? Is it going to solve the problem or not? Is there a better way? This is a very quick way of exposing core assumptions about why I prefer to change or not to change, or why I prefer one change over another. But there's also 2 other reasons not to change. Is the crutches, the effort and risk of climbing up the mountain. What if I break my neck trying to climb? So there's 2 crutches. One represents the effort, the other one represents the risk. And then there's this beautiful mermaid at the base of the mountain that I love so much and I don't want to leave behind, but I can't take her with me. If we ask ourselves, or you ask somebody else, so what is your mermaid? What are you scared of losing to make this change? It quickly can expose an exaggerated fear of loss that they have. And if you ask them, what are you scared of gaining that you don't want? What's your crutches? This fear of effort or risk, it quickly exposes those assumptions. And then only once they're exposed can you check and challenge them. Unless you've exposed them, they are hidden in the subconscious mind. In plain sight, they can be exposed with a simple question. And those are the 4 parameters that I realized was at least a key part of a decision-making method that would help somebody expose and challenge their own assumptions. So what does it look like today? 5 simple steps. We've got very limited time, so I'm going to go very quickly through it. But what you'll see is every step has been designed to prevent a common decision mistake. So define your problem and why it's important. That's trying to prevent the mistake of wasting our limited attention on an unimportant problem or procrastinating on an important one. So the app will simply ask you, what's the problem? Why is it important to you to solve this? And why is it important to the people that you care about or the organization? And then it pauses and says, is it important enough to resolve it right now? Step 2, we often make the mistake of jumping to a solution, not realizing that the solution is one side of a conflict. So what is the conflict between the change versus not change? And what are the unique pros and cons of each of these options that puts me in a conflict? And specifically, we say unique pros and cons because every action or change could have many positives and negatives. The only ones we care about are the ones that are unique to the change versus the not change. That's why that analogy of the pot of gold, the mermaid, the alligator, and the crutches is so important because it forces us to say what's unique about the change and no change. But we also make the mistake of simply blaming somebody. So why don't we blame somebody and put ourselves in their shoes, whether we blame ourselves or not, what action caused the problem, what should they have done, what's the change they should have made. We put ourselves in their shoes and we see how we could resolve that conflict. Step 3 is all about coming up with new options. Options that have big upsides if they work, small downsides if they don't. They have more pros, less cons than our current status quo. And what we've done here is I've created 4 options that you can go through. So change plus plus is simply saying, what can I add to the change so I don't have to give up the mermaid, the positive of not changing, and I don't have to live with the crutches, the effort and risk. It turns out that when we compromise, we give up stuff. We hate giving up stuff. We value losses much greater than equivalent gains, but we don't mind adding. So it's a very subtle way of getting somebody to challenge an assumption by just asking them to do a thought experiment. What can you add? And change plus plus suddenly gives them a new option. But we have to be objective, so why don't we also do the not change plus plus, right? So think about stop smoking. The positive of smoking for them is being able to deal with stress. The negative of stopping would be gaining weight. So what can I add to the idea of stop smoking to still allow me to cope with stress and not gain weight? It turns out that most people, if you just ask them, they can come up with good injections. We have a more advanced method that allows you to dive a bit more deeper to first expose the assumption, gender, injection, and then the how-to part. Not change, think about implement a new IT system or get a new iPhone versus keep using the old one, right? That is also not a viable option as long as it forces us to give up on a pot of gold or to keep living with the alligators. So again, you can ask, so why can't we keep the legacy system? What can we add to still get most of the pot of gold that we thought was unique to the new IT system? And what can we add to get rid of all the complaints about the current one? That gives us a new option, not change plus plus. And then option 3 is when and when not to change. Can we understand what's causing the conflict between these 2 options and simply come up with a rule that tells us when to make the change and when not? And then lastly, a fun one, which is another change. So something that doesn't have to do with keep the existing IT system or not. Another change that can give us all the pros, now that we know what are the pros that are being compromised here and the cons that we don't want to live with, maybe something like outsourcing. And it turns out when you ask people these simple, direct questions, they often come up with injections. And if they can't, and you show them examples of how others have done it, they very quickly can learn. Or you simply ask them, how have others done this? From time to time, it is necessary to go to the more advanced method to go a level deeper. But that often requires a bit of coaching and help. What we found out is 70% of people that are using our apps are coming up with incredible injections without any external support, just by being asked the right question. So are we done yet? No, we have to select one of these options to move forward. And then, of course, the next thing that will happen, we present our great idea to somebody else, or we start really thinking about it, and we come up with all the yes buts. They come up with all the yes buts. So rather than use these yes buts as excuses not to act, why don't we use them as a way of strengthening our solution and getting people to contribute to building the solution? Ellie said very clearly, you cannot overcome a strong emotion with logic. He was right. But he also said the only way to overcome strong emotion is with an even stronger emotion. Of course, an even stronger emotion is an even bigger alligator. You know, if you don't change, this is what's going to happen. That might work. But an even stronger emotion is the positive emotion of getting people involved into developing a new solution. And you can say to them, you can get involved by telling us all the reasons why this will never work. And yes, we apply a certain classification. Yes, but it's not sufficient to be a win for all. Yes, but It has some potential negatives, and yes, but there's some implementation obstacles. We asked them to classify it, but also to give us the yes and. And we keep on adding pluses to our solution to make it more and more robust, more of a fully baked solution. Are we done yet? No. What's the next mistake that we can make? We failed to do a good experiment. Why? Because we don't communicate clearly our experiment, and we don't have a way of tracking. So what the app does is it automatically summarizes your full analysis into a little project charter. Why change? Which is whatever you've put in as what's my problem and why it's important to me and others to resolve. So it's there, you can see clearly the assumption of why change. What for? Why are we doing it? We want more of these pros, less of these cons. The pros become our green flags that we want to check off as milestones. The cons becomes our red flags. We want to stay away from those. It gives us a clear path to move towards the goal, climbing up the mountain. And then what do? Well, we still need to do it. Just do it now. And there what we do in the app is we allow you to monitor your progress. So you can say not started, in progress. Frozen means I'm still planning to do it, but I caught myself multitasking, so I'm not going to do it right now. Or complete means I've completed all the actions. I've done all the pluses, but I haven't yet achieved the outcome. And finally, I've achieved the outcome. So quick examples. I'm not going to go through a lot of detail. You'll see it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is one where a company's earnings is below 10%. Their earnings per share. The CEO jumps to a solution, immediately announces 10% layoffs, right? Rather than not doing the layoffs and doubling down on the current strategy to achieve their growth. Who do you think the CEO blamed for not meeting the targets? His own leadership team that gave him the forecast on which they based the earnings. What did he want those people to do? Is to be more conservative in raising those forecasts. What we can do is we can read off directly off the diagram what's the exaggerated frustration and exaggerated expectation that caused the CEO to overreact? And what was the exaggerated fear of loss and the exaggerated fear of effort or risk that caused this team to underreact? So we can read it directly off these diagrams. This is quite a serious one of an pilot that we're doing in the UK with young people that can phone into call centers, work with counselors that are considering self-harm. I'm feeling hopeless and defeated. I'm years behind my peers. As a result, I'm considering killing myself. Who do I blame? I blame myself. I'm 25 years old. I haven't developed yet the coping skills that my peers have got. What should I have done? I should have invested the time in myself to develop these skills. And again, looking at those diagonals, we can directly read off the diagram. That person can read off the diagram and understand better why in the past they might have overreacted or underreacted. Our big lesson here was just understanding can dramatically improve our well-being. For somebody, even though they don't use the app to come up with a new solution, just the fact that they realize they're not unique, that there are other people going through the same issues, or that they had a good reason for making a bad decision, or that somebody else that did something to them had a good reason for making a bad decision, dramatically improves in a meaningful way their well-being. Of course, it can be improved even more if they then do something, right? So there's a number of examples. This is one about being bullied at school. So a kid that's 10-year-old explaining, I'm being bullied at school. What am I considering? I need to fight back. Normally I don't. Who do I blame? The bully. What do I want him to do is to stop. And he can again immediately read off the diagram why in the past he's procrastinated or didn't act and why the bully have overreacted. So where have we tested this? We've tested it initially in the private sector, in-house decision-making programs. We had CEOs of companies using this process and the app to really make breakthroughs. There's a number of testimonials that we've had. We've tried it with high-tech teams selling B2B, using this method to prepare themselves, putting themselves in the shoes of their customer. Why my customer hasn't bought in the past, right? And who do I blame? Who did the customer blame for that? We've tested it in the public sector. We've tested it with individuals. So how does the app work? Very quickly, you can download it. It's Harmony Decision Maker. It's a free app. It basically just guides you through the steps. It says, you've got your own decision-making coach available 24/7. Harmony, our virtual coach, asks you questions. She guides you through the process. At the end of every step, you get a graphical display that summarizes your answers to the step, and it then highlights, these are your assumptions. Please check them. Are you ready to move to is this problem important enough? Yes, go. Go to the next step. And again, it uses a messenger interface. You simply answer the questions. You see the outcome. It takes you to step 3. It allows you to explore all 4 options. You can monitor and share your analysis with other people. You can, if you get stuck, search our community library and see how other people resolve this issue. You can view and listen to other people's stories and tell your own story. I call it a story on one page. The new version of the app, you can actually press the play button and you can listen to the interview between Harmony and the person. It's really fascinating. So we've got a growing worldwide community. We are very excited about this. We are using it to do research. So we are interested why people overspend. A message, a letter goes out to a specific community to say, we'd like to understand, why do you keep on overspending? Why do you keep on overeating? Watch a simple video to show you how the questionnaire works. They go and enter it directly into the app, and this data is then shared with the researchers. Plus, they get the benefit to see how they can resolve it. And then lastly, I'm extremely honored and privileged. I've been invited to the Tate Summit. It's a once a 4-year experience. Top 1,000 people in TED are going there. 250 of the top TED talkers are going to be there. And I've been asked to facilitate a workshop. The title is, How Do You Make Impossible Decisions? And I define an impossible decision as a decision that not only have unique upsides for both options, but have unique downsides and big downsides. How do I decide? And we've just received certification from Orca. They're the leading organization in the world that certifies apps for use for improving your well-being. So this is a National Health Services in the UK that we're working with, and our app will now be part of the resources that somebody going through well-being issues can download. Thank you so much.